Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to make delicious, melt in your mouth, flaky pie crust that is easy to roll out every single time. And I'm also going to give you my great grandmother's recipe because it has two kind of secret ingredients, but I'm giving you the whole recipe, so they're really not that secret. But two ingredients that you don't commonly see in a lot of pie crust recipes, but that help you get that spectacular texture, as well as some of the tips and techniques that I'm going to share with you to ensure that you have perfect flaky pie crust as well. So first thing up, the pie crust recipe that I use uses all real butter. There is no need to use shortening and all of those different hydrogenated oils to get a delicious flaky pie crust. And let's be real butter is going to taste better anyways. Now, if you have lard, some of my favorite textures and favorite flavors is actually to do half lard and half butter. However, I know a lot of you might not have your own lard. We get ours from our pigs. So I'm going to show you in today's tutorial just using all butter because that's something every single one of us can easily get access to. But if you do happen to have lard, do sub in half the butter for half lard and you're going to have like the best pie crust that you ever did. But all butter comes really, really close. So it's really important that your fats and your liquids, that everything be very chilled when we're working with pie crust to help ensure we get that flaky texture. So this stick of butter, I'm going to show you how we cut that up, but I've already pre-cut and had everything chilling in the fridge. So I highly recommend ahead of time to go ahead and get your fat, especially your butter, cut up and then let some of it chill. And I usually put about 1/4 cup of the butter after I've chopped it up. You can also put that in the freezer. I don't like to freeze all of my butter. I've done it, I've tested that out. I've grated frozen butter in and done some different things like that. And I feel like the best texture is when just a small amount of it has been frozen and the rest of it has just been chilled in the fridge. So let's get this last stick of butter chopped up and prepped here. Okay, so the easiest way that I found to do this is to cut it in half lengthwise, and then you're just gonna cut it again lengthwise. So you're basically cutting it into a 1/4. And then I like to just stack these right on top of one another, and you'll notice I just leave it all on the wax paper here. And then we're just gonna go and chop it like this. I find that that's the fastest way and you get the most uniform sized pieces to cut into our flour. Now, I happen to be doing 10 pies right now for the holidays, so I'm going to be using my food processor. But if I'm just doing one batch of dough, which this is one batch, but I'm doing multiple batches to make enough pies, this recipe makes 4 pie crusts. So you can do 2 pies if you've got a top and a bottom crust for a fruit pie, or you can do 4 cream pies or pumpkin pies. So we're going to be adding this flour. I've already got measured out the butter to 4 cups of flour, and you can get the exact recipe at melissaknorris.com. I'll also have a printable version. You can follow that link below this video. So we're gonna take this butter and we're gonna put it in with the flour and the sugar and the salt that are already in our food processor. And now we're gonna grab the rest of the butter from the fridge. So here you can see I've got my other sticks of butter. And we're just going to pulse this until we get this butter incorporated and cut into our flour. So let's give it a quick check, inspection. So right now, we'll get that up and close there. I still have some large chunks of butter. And this is too large. We don't want to leave them like that. So you know that you need to go further when it looks like this. But I am starting to get some smaller chunks where it looks a little bit more sandy-ish. And that's what we're after. But we need to get the rest of these larger ones further incorporated. Now this is getting closer. These chunks of butter, this is some of the largest chunks that are left. And it's just a little bit bigger than pea size right now. This is still just a little bit too big for the majority of them. I want them to be a little bit smaller than pea size. So we're making this a little bit finer than you would if you were doing biscuits. So we're gonna pulse this for just a few more pulses. Okay, so now you can see that this is a lot finer. We want to be able to see like little pebbles in there, but we don't want any of them to be larger than a pea and just a little bit smaller than pea size, which is where we're at now. These are all fairly uniform. So now we're going to take that butter that we've had in the freezer, that smaller amount, which is about 4 tablespoons, And we're gonna let that be a little bit bigger size, and we're gonna incorporate that. And you can save your butter wrappers that have some of the butter on them, because these work great if you need to grease any pans. You can just throw them in the fridge if you want to, or you can pop some of them in the freezer if you have a lot, like I'm going to after doing 2 more batches of pie crust here after this one. So this is the perfect texture that you want to have your flour when the butter is incorporated. You can see a few pea-sized chunks, and then the rest are smaller. Now it's time to add our liquid. Now this next part that I'm going to show you, that we're adding in liquids first, these are my great grandma's 2 secret ingredients that you don't normally see in a lot of pie crust. The first is 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and the acid actually, especially when we're doing it in something like this with a pie crust where we're not really kneading the dough like you would for bread. We don't want the gluten to be developed. That's how come pie crust, if you overwork pie crust, it can be tough because you've overdeveloped the gluten. And the addition of the acid seems to help those gluten strands not get overdeveloped and helps the texture of the dough. So I like to use apple cider vinegar. You can use white vinegar, but I feel like apple cider vinegar, one, we make it here on the homestead, so it's something that I've got plenty of, and I feel like apple cider lends itself much better. And don't worry, you don't actually taste the vinegar in the finished pie, but I like to use the apple cider vinegar. And there are pie crust recipes, a lot of them, that do use vinegar, not all. But the second ingredient is to beat that with 1 egg, and then you put that in as your liquid first before adding our ice water. So I'm gonna get that egg out of the fridge. We have our own chickens, so a lot of the times when I get eggs, I just leave them on the counter for a few days as we go through them. But this is one instance where you do not want room temperature eggs. We want them to be cold. So we're gonna add this to our vinegar. And then we're just gonna use a fork to incorporate these liquids together. It's not so much that I really want the egg to be beaten. I just wanna have these liquids incorporated, and then we're going to add them into our pie dough here. Now next, I've got my ice water here. So we actually have some ice cubes with some cold tap water, and it's been sitting, so it's really nice and chilled. Now we're not going to add all of the water yet. We're just going to add about 3 tablespoons of the water to this, and then we're going to incorporate that before we pull it out of the food processor and begin to finish it by hand. So we're going to kind of do a test. Our goal is to have just enough liquids for the pie dough to form a ball and to stick together. And we haven't added enough yet, but we're going to kind of test this. And the way that you test it is to just squeeze it together and see if it starts to hold, which this is. So that's a great sign. And we may still need to add a little bit more water, but at this point, we're actually going to put it on the counter and begin to work it with our hands, which I know a lot of people have this fear about using your hands because they're body temperature and melting the dough, but it's okay. We're gonna do this part by hand, and I'm gonna show you some techniques when you're working with the dough to ensure that you do get some delightful flaky layers. So we're just gonna dump this right onto our work surface here. And you're just gonna kind of start to bring this together into a dough ball. So you're just gonna start to press these together, and it's not really forming all the way yet, though it is starting to come together. So we're going to add a little bit more water. We're just going to do a couple tablespoons at a time. And you may need to do a small little sprinkle of water like on top. This might need 1 more little bit of water, which will put us right at, as I was counting my tablespoons, a 1/2 cup and 1 tablespoon. And it depends on the humidity in the air, the temperature, the barometric pressure, so many different things on how much water you'll end up adding total each time. Okay, so we've gotten that folded over a couple of times. So now we're just going to push this into 1 full dough ball. And then this needs to go in the fridge and chill. So we want to make sure we get this wrapped up. And I don't really worry about if it's like completely smooth, the dough ball at this point, because we're going to be separating this out and quartering it later after it's been fully chilled. So we're just going to get that wrapped up nice and tight. and into the fridge. And then we're gonna pull out the one that I did last night. So I wanna make sure that we have down a sprinkling of flour so that it doesn't stick to our work surface. And then I actually need to make blackberry and cherry pies, so I need a top and bottom. I just usually eyeball it. You could weigh it if you want it to be exact, but eyeballing works just fine. And so we're gonna cut that in half. This will be for the other half of the pie. And while I'm working with each piece, so I've got my bottom and my top crust here, I just loosely wrap this back up because it's not gonna be that long in the fridge, but stick it back in the fridge. Don't just let the whole massive dough sit out at room temperature while you're working the other pieces. Now, because I'm doing this actually for a fundraiser for my daughter where we're baking up a whole bunch of these pies, I'm actually just going to be using these throwaway pie plates. This is an 8 3/4-inch pie plate, but this recipe does the 9-inch pies as well. And I'll tell you, the very best texture and flavor that I get for baking my pies is when you use a cast iron skillet as your pie plate. So if you're not needing to give these away or do them for a fundraiser, go ahead and use your cast iron skillet. They make the best pie plates. It's also how I bake my biscuits. The texture is just delightful in those. So I hope the camera will pick this up, but you can actually see the little dots of the butter, which we want to, and you can also see a little bit of streaking of the butter in here as well. But the butter is very visible even within the flour, and that's what we're after. That's what we want. That's going to ensure those great pockets of flakiness all throughout your dough. So now we're going to start rolling this. So floured rolling pin, and we're going to start at half point of the dough and go out. So we're going to push that way. And then you're going to turn it a quarter turn. And there's a couple of reasons that we're going to roll our dough in this manner. One, if you're always turning it, then you know that it's not beginning to stick to the countertop. If it starts to stick, then you just need to put down a little bit more flour. We don't want to incorporate too much flour though, so that's why we're just going to keep rolling it like this and turning it, so that we don't have to put down excess when we don't need it. And the other reason that we're doing it this way is because it helps create a more round and uniform pie dough, which we need when we're putting it into our pie plate. Oh, and you can see all those awesome streaks of the butter and all of the pebbling in there. All of those are really good signs. And you're also noticing that this is not shrinking back on me, which is good. We don't want to have the shrinkage happening with our pie crust. So after you get it about what you think is the size of your pie plate, then we always want to do a measure. And remember, there's a little bit of depth there, so I'm going to take this just a little bit bigger. Whoop. And we got a little bit of sticking there. See, I told you it'll tell you if it starts to stick and you need any more flour. So we're going to measure again, and then I'll add more flour if I need to. We're just about good. I'm going to go out just a little bit right here on that part. So I'm going to put just a small amount of flour just on the rolling pin. Get those little wrinkles out from my stickiness. And now we're going to put this right into our pie plate. So this dough is really easy to handle. We can just lift that up, set it in there, try to get it in the center. And then we're going to put it like that. You don't really want to pull your pie dough, so if it's not all the way down in there, don't try and pull and stretch it, because it will shrink when it bakes if you've pulled it. So you just kind of want to drape it and then just kind of settle it down in there. You can see I'm not actually pulling and stretching, just kind of getting it settled there. So now we've got this crust, our bottom crust is ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to make a cherry pie with this one. So we've got our cherry pie filling here that I canned up during the summer months. And we're going to get that added here. I want every last drop of deliciousness. And I tell you, you know, if you are a member of the Pioneering Today Academy, or if you're in my Home Canning with Confidence course, that I always preach how much I love having this home canned pie filling done up, because in summertime, a lot of this fruit we're growing ourselves, but you can get at fabulous prices if you're not. And this time of year, you're super busy having to do all the other baking and prep for the holidays. And so this is so easy, and I don't have to pay the prices in the middle of winter. And actually, I can't even get blackberries where I live. Oh, and I almost forgot, one of the most important steps is I always like to put a few dots of butter on the top of my fruit pie fillings before I put that top crust on. edges. Actually, this is pretty good so that I have enough to tuck it up and under here. So I just kind of like to pull it up like this, and then there's a lot of different techniques for when you're crimping the edge of your pie, but one of the things you want to do is have it hold the rim of the pie when you're putting it on there so it's touching it, and that helps it from shrinking as well if you can kind of get it right on that outer edge of the pie plate. Now, some people like to get fancy. You can take a fork and you can do like with the forks of the time, and you can press down and make different patterns. The way that my mom did it, which I think the way that we're shown how to do it the first time is usually the way that we always go, and she just always took her fingers and she kind of pinched it together, and she made a design on the sides by doing that. And some people will take like their finger and make different things. So you can get really fancy, or you can just kind of go like this. Okay, so our pie is almost ready to go in the oven, but there's a couple more tips that you need to get from Grandma to finish this bad boy off. So we're going to brush the top of our pastry with a little bit of milk here. And if you enjoyed this video on learning how to make old-fashioned pie crust that turns out flaky every time, make sure that you hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of our weekly videos when they come out, and hit that little bell as well so that you get notified as soon as they come out so that you don't miss any of these great resources. Now, if you want the printed version, written out version of the pie crust, which I know you do if you've watched it this far, so that you can use it in your own kitchen, you can go to melissaknorris.com/pie crust. Or the link is below in the video description as well. Now, if you want to learn how to batch up and have a whole bunch of pie crust ready to go and be able to freeze it so that when it comes to those busy holiday times, or even just during the week when we're busy with work and everything else that's going, you're going to want to make sure that you catch my upcoming video, which is part 2, and I show you multiple different ways that you can freeze and prep your pie dough that don't affect the texture at all, and they will thaw beautiful so that you can have quiches and pot pies and of course fruit pies and cream pies, any kind of pie your heart so desires at just a moment's notice. And if you want to have all of your pie filling canned up at home and ready to go on the pantry shelf for during this time of year and all year when it's not growing fresh outside, I have a link below for you. You can go and check out my full canning course where I show you how to can everything at home so that you always have a well-stocked pantry. So thank you so much. Let me know if you have any pie, pastry, and baking tips in the comments below, and what your favorite pie is. I can't wait to see you in the next video where we will be freezing and batching up all of our dough. Bye guys.